everyone, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to the Singapore-Norway Innovation Conference. Now, my name is Sharanjit Leyl. It's a real delight to be your conference chair and moderator for today. And of course, we're very warm welcome to all of you right here joining us at Suntec City physically, but we have another audience watching us virtually from all around the world, from places as far afield as Oslo, Geneva, and elsewhere right here in Singapore. Now, a mere 10 days. That's how far away we are from COP26. That's the Global Climate Change Conference in Glasgow. But today, we aim to bring a little bit of hope to the biggest issue of our lives, climate change, by talking about solutions to combat it, whether it's through investment or in the urban and maritime industries. We've gathered the thought leaders who will help fight climate change and whom you'll be hearing from in the next few hours. But to kick off today's proceedings, I'd like to welcome onto the stage Leonard Stornes, the president of NBAS, the Norway Business Association of Singapore. Leonard.
Dear Senior Minister of State, Mr. Chee Singapore's Ambassador to Norway, Mr. Hwa Yo Tan, Ambassador from Norway, Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Eivind Homme, Ministers, Ambassadors, Chief Executives, industry leaders, dear NBAS members, partners, and friends, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to the second edition of Singapore-Norway Innovation Conference, organized by the Norwegian Business Association in Singapore in partnership with Innovation Norway and the Royal Norwegian Embassy. Singapore-Norway Innovation Conference was established with the ambition to develop strong links and mutual beneficial synergies between the authorities and businesses in Singapore and Norway. During the pandemic, our two nations have developed an even stronger synergy and interest because of the common focus we have and the driving forces within our societies and the operating environment, with clear trends towards digitalization, decarbonization, alternative fuel, focus on sustainability, circular economy, clean recycling, and the handling of food waste, etc. These are all areas of expertise where many Norwegian companies and universities have core knowledge and experience and should, in many respects, be good partners for Singapore. It is therefore my hope that Singapore-Norway Innovation Conference will be a catalyst in the process with developing more and new business opportunities and synergies between Singapore and Norway. If you are not yet connected to the Norwegian Business Association but would like to know more, please reach out to us and we'd like to have a conversation with you. I would like to thank Innovation Norway and Royal Norwegian Embassy in Singapore for the very good cooperation during the planning and organizing of Singapore-Norway Innovation Conference. And I hope that you all find value in the topic and discussions that will be on the agenda today. Thank you.
And next, I'd like to welcome His Excellency Eivind Homme, the Ambassador for the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Good morning in Oslo and Geneva. Good afternoon to you here in Singapore and to those joining us from other parts of Asia. Excellencies, esteemed speakers, panelists, and participants, dear friends, it's such a privilege on behalf of Team Norway in Singapore to join the chair of NBAS and the director of Innovation Norway to extending a warm welcome to the Singapore-Norway Innovation Conference 2021. We are deeply honored to have with us on this occasion Norway's Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry, Mr. Halvard Ingebrigtsen, and Singapore's Senior Minister of State, the Ministry of Transport, Mr. Chee. Your participation demonstrates the close and long-standing relations a strong friendship between Norway and Singapore, and the role of Singapore in so many ways as the port of call for Norway in Asia. The foundation for this relationship has always been one of commercial ties, one of mutually beneficial cooperation, and a common belief in the rule-based international order with open and free trade and freedom of navigation. Our point of departure for expanding the innovation partnership between our governments and between our businesses is very promising. Singapore and Norway share ambitious plans for investments in and improvements of the ecosystem for developing new, cutting-edge technologies and solutions for further digitalization. For both countries, innovation is crucial for tackling our domestic challenges as well as the global, not least fighting climate change and implementing decarbonization of our economies. I note as continued strong interest for cooperation with Norway and Norwegian companies in Singapore, be it within sustainability and circular economy, energy, maritime, offshore renewables, aquaculture, smart cities, health tech, just to mention some of them. Our companies are in the forefront of green and digital transformation. Norway has extensive academic and research cooperation with Singapore. Our countries' research and solutions often complement each other. Together, we have much to offer the rest of Asia and globally. Dear partners, we have a very solid foundation and an enormous potential for further expanding the innovation and business partnership between Norway and Singapore. This conference offers a platform for getting to know each other even better, learning from one another, and exploring business opportunities together. I wish you all a very productive conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And next, a warm round of applause for Chee Tat, the Senior Minister of State from Singapore's Ministry of Transport.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for inviting me to speak at the opening of the second Singapore-Norway Innovation Conference. Singapore and Norway have a long-standing and fruitful partnership in the area of maritime innovation. In the year 2000, the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore, or MPA, signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the Research Council of Norway. The MOU grew our research collaborations, and earlier this year, I'm happy to note that the MOU was renewed for the 8th term. This MOU has served as the foundation for our maritime research institutes to grow their partnerships with maritime companies in both countries and to develop practical solutions for the maritime industry. For example, the rail energy efficiency and emissions in the Seaway project studied how ship operators working under real-world constraints can use ship performance data to make more energy-efficient operational decisions. Research institutes and industry partners from both Singapore and Norway were involved in this 3-year project, and the findings have been applied by Norwegian company SKS Tanker to achieve better fuel consumption management for its vessels. Translating good ideas into scalable solutions and viable businesses requires a vibrant ecosystem that offers access to markets, technology, funding, and talent. Singapore and Norway have long maritime traditions and strong innovation cultures. We are natural partners in offering such an innovation ecosystem for the maritime community. MPA's annual maritime innovation process offers a structured way for maritime companies with problem statements to engage with solver communities, including startups, including technology solution providers, and also including our researchers and our students. We want to harness their creativity to develop practical solutions. This year, we were pleased to collaborate with Innovation Norway to invite 30 leaders from the Norwegian maritime community in Singapore to participate in the maritime innovation process for the first time. Norwegian companies like Star Information Systems and GARD co-sponsored industry-wide challenge statements which have been channeled to the startup community via the Pier 71 Smart Port Challenge 2021. The grand finals of this year's Smart Port Challenge will be held next month in November, and I look forward to the proposals from our participants. Ladies and gentlemen, as uncertainty and disruption become the new normal in our operating environment, innovation and adaptability are vital for us to remain competitive and to respond to challenges of the future. Singapore and Norway are not only old friends, like-minded partners, we also share a lot of interests, we also have strong capabilities, and I think these interests and complementary strengths will allow us to build on our strong foundations and to forge even stronger win-win partnerships in maritime innovation. Thank you very much, and I wish all of you a fruitful conference.
Thank you so much for that, Senior Minister of State Chee. And next we have a speech by the Deputy Minister of Halvard Ingebrigtsen of Norway's Ministry of Trade, Industry and Fisheries.
Chee Hong-tat, Excellency Ambassador Tan, Singapore's ambassador to Norway, Excellency Ambassador Homme of the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Singaporean friends. Dear all, it's a pleasure for me to address you at this event. I want to offer my gratitude to the Norwegian Business Association in Singapore, Innovation Norway, and the Norwegian Embassy in Singapore for inviting me and for organizing this conference. It represents a great opportunity to address how our two countries can work together to create new green jobs and cut greenhouse gas emissions. Singapore is one of the most important locations for Norwegian companies in Asia, and our maritime clusters are highly interlinked. In the maritime field, green shipping and digitalization is high on the Norwegian government's political agenda. Singapore has similar priorities and is among our closest and most valued maritime partners. Singapore is one of the few places abroad where the full maritime cluster is represented, contributing to trade, collaboration and wealth creation. However, Norwegian companies from other sectors have also chosen to be present in Singapore due to the favorable business environment. Norway can also offer excellent seafood chemicals, energy, pharmaceuticals and health technology. And as of late, our ICT and telecom industries have increased their activity in Singapore. There are also significant cooperation in the field of research and higher education between our two countries. Both Singapore and Norway have open economies relying on export and businesses abroad. To make progress towards a greener industry and lower greenhouse gas emissions, we have to join forces across borders. We need to take advantage of the experience and the expertise that Singaporean and Norwegian business already possess, and at the same time allow new ideas, businesses and industries to develop. By working together, we can take advantage of the opportunities that the green transitions offers. I look forward to a continuous close cooperation between our two countries and wish you the best of luck to your event today. So thank you very much for your attention.
It's wonderful. A message there from the Deputy Minister of Norway's Trade, Industry and Fisheries. And finally, we have an introduction by Paul Kastmann, the Director of Innovation Norway, Singapore.
Thank you, very much, Sharanjit. Good afternoon to all of you watching here in Singapore and across the region, and good morning to all of you tuning in from Norway. I'd like to thank Senior Minister of State Chee Tat, Deputy Minister Ingebrigtsen, and my fellow Team Norway representatives, Ambassador Eivind Homme, and also Leonard Stornes for their opening remarks, and extend my gratitude to our local partners for their support, specifically MPA, Enterprise Singapore, and Norwegian Cultural Centre. When we organized the inaugural edition of SNIC in September last year, we were reeling from the COVID-19 pandemic. We were in the middle of it. The conference in its entirety was shot in a studio with no live audience. Albeit we are not quite out of the woods just yet, I believe that we're now seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. The fact that we are gathered here today is proof of that. And we are also seeing vaccinated travel lanes established between Singapore and an increasing number of countries, hopefully also Norway, in the not too distant future. Despite the limitations on travel, business operations, manpower, logistics, we have seen an impressive tenacity and adaptability amongst the companies that we work with. But the pandemic is by no means the singular challenge of our time. We also need tenacity and adaptability to accelerate the shift to a sustainable and green economy, which is of paramount importance to us all. Like the pandemic, climate change knows no borders and requires us to pool our resources and competence into joint efforts. Collaborating together in innovation and research and finding joint solutions is something that Singapore and Norway do very well together. There are more than 30 MOUs between Norwegian and Singaporean research institutions, and a large number of joint industry programs or projects between commercial and government stakeholders. Just last week, Kongsberg Digital signed an MOU with the Singapore Maritime Institute and a group of partners to cooperate on a maritime artificial intelligence R&D program. And recently, the Maritime and the Port Authority of Singapore set up a global maritime decarbonization center in partnership with DNV, BW Group, Semco Marine, and others to support research and technology development in the field of clean marine fuel. I'd also like to mention the MOU that we signed at our last SNIC event between Enterprise Singapore and Innovation Norway, where we collaborate within core sectors of our bilateral relationship. In today's program, we will explore the global challenges that are shaping our time and how we are working to address them, both nationally and regionally, in Norway and EU, and Singapore and Southeast Asia. With challenges come opportunities. How can smart, sustainable solutions help us solve these challenges? What business opportunities do we see from the green transition? And how will we finance it? We will also take a closer look at two specific dimensions of the green shift: sustainable urban solutions and future ports and fuel. I'd also like to highlight tomorrow's program, where we will deep dive into more specific problem statements within these two same dimensions. In the maritime setting, we will look at maritime communication from aerial to subsea drones to satellite and 5G technologies, as well as specific technologies for greening deep sea shipping, hydrogen, ammonia. In the urban setting, we will look at deposit return schemes and the efficient management of food waste. Again, I'd like to thank our partners, and I look forward to many fruitful discussions. And with that, I'd like to give the word back to our eminent MC and moderator, Sharanjit Leyl. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul Kastmann. And now that all our introductions are done, I'd like to introduce you to the big prize that awaits many of you at the end of today. Of course, for many of you watching, the pandemic has changed the way we all work. Working from home, of course, has suddenly become the norm. And suddenly, what you sit on has become vitally important. So next up, a chance to win something that will help transform how you sit while you're working. Here's a message from Flock, a Norwegian producer of workplace furniture and acoustic solutions.
Explore the world of Flock. We make beautiful furniture that spans a lifetime. Designing human-centered products with the fewest possible resources. Choosing more natural and less harmful materials. Using recycled resources with former lives and stories to tell. We help take greater care of people and our planet. Through sustainable innovation, we create lasting furniture. For you and generations to come. Flock, inspire great work.
And there you have it. And I believe you can see the chair right there on the stage in the corner. And if you want a chance to win it, it's called the Hag Capisco chair, by the way. It allows you to move even while you're sitting down. To win it, though, you need to submit the most popular question of the day. And in order to do that, you have to go and log on to Slido. Take a look at the instructions there on your screen. Log in and simply enter the code, and the person with the smartest question of the day, which incidentally will get the most votes, will be the winner. Of course, terms and conditions apply. We'll be announcing the winner at 6 p.m. today. And next, before our first high-level panel session of the day, is a message from another sponsor. Cambi are a world leader in thermal hydrolysis solutions.
Sewage sludge treatment is at the heart of the world's intertwined water, energy, and food challenges. Every single day, 5,000 children die from diseases caused by poor water quality and lack of sanitation. Every day, the water sector uses more electricity than Germany and France combined, with large economic and environmental costs. And every day, more than 500,000 tons of non-renewable chemical fertilizers are applied to produce our food. To achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and pass on a livable planet for generations to come, it is time to treat sewage sludge responsibly and turn it into its valuable component bioresources. Several reliable and proven technologies for hydrogenization, energy, and nutrient recovery are ready to deploy at wastewater treatment plants across the globe, turning them into efficient resource recovery facilities. For instance, thermal hydrolysis coupled with anaerobic digestion can transform sludge treatment. It destroys the pathogens in sludge for safe biosolid land application. It slashes sludge volumes and associated handling costs through better dewatering, and it produces 25 to 40% more green electricity from biogas. Working together, water utilities, expert consultants, construction companies, technology suppliers, NGOs, researchers and educators can bring into operation modern resource recovery facilities at thousands of sludge treatment plants all over the world. It's time to rethink sewage sludge.
Turn our attention to the green transition, how to overcome global challenges with innovative solutions. And we've got a high-level panel here. Joining us, Børge Brende, the president of the World Economic Forum, Ananda Rambaska, the deputy CEO of the National Environment Agency here in Singapore, We also have Per Nidebakk. He's the Executive Vice President of Innovation Norway. They are all joining us virtually. But here physically with us, I can invite onto the stage Professor Benjamin Horton, the Director of the Earth Observatory of Singapore at Nanyang Technological University. Professor Horton, do join us on stage. And remember, on Slido, please do ask your smart questions because I will be asking our panelists this. Marvelous to meet you all, gentlemen. Fantastic. Well, let's kick off, of course, with the first big question, obviously, the consequences of climate change. And with COP26 just days away, we must find green solutions now. Let's start with you, Børge Brende. How is the World Economic Forum making this a priority at the next Davos Forum?
No, good morning from Geneva. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for bringing people together.
Some audio problems. We will get that sorted.
Maybe you can hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Okay, we are still having some issues with the audio. Maybe I will go and ask our next speaker, and I'll come back to you, Børge. Let's go to Ananda Rambaskar now. Obviously, here at the NEA, Singapore is making great strides. Tell us, how is Singapore trying to tackle climate change?
That's with them. It's something interesting. One moment.
Oh dear, we seem to be having some audio problems there as well. This is the problem with a truly live conference that is happening hybrid. We hope we can sort that out. I shall try once more with Per Nidebakk, who is also virtual with us. Per, let me just check if we can hear you. Can you say hello?
Yes.
Marvelous.
Hello,
okay,
can you hear me?
Per. Fantastic. So tell us how is Innovation Norway trying to deal with tackling climate change and coming up with innovative solutions?
Yeah. First, thank you very much for the invitation. First of all, I would like to share the concern and the urgency of finding these solutions. And I would like to share some of the highlights of a report done by DNV, the Norske Veritas, on the global energy transition outlook in 2021. And they really state that we are not meeting the Paris ambitions. They predict that the global energy-related emissions will fall by 9% by 2030, and that the global average temperatures increase will reach 2.3 degrees by the end of the century. So this is to some extent sad news. And the electrification is surging ahead, and renewables will outcompete all other energy sources. That's the prediction of DNV. And the fossil fuels are gradually losing position, but will retain a 50% share by 2050. So we do have a verdict that is clear. The world needs vastly more green electricity, more biofuel, more carbon capture and storage, and dramatically accelerate and scale to reach this ambition. And we believe that a lot is being done, but we need to be much faster in order to reach the ambition of the Paris Agreement. And I believe this is a case of sense of urgency. As you know, we are in Norway very dependent on oil and gas, and we see that we have to build new and sustainable industries to secure our welfare and value creation in the future. So what we are doing is actually to see how we can focus our instruments, like financial instruments and green platform, as we call it, to actually boost these kind of green solutions in Norway. So that's some of the things we are doing in Innovation Norway. The other thing is, of course, we are working as a policy advisor for the Norwegian government. And there we are suggesting new instruments and schemes help triggering these new solutions. And we don't believe that public support is enough. We have to have a private-public cooperation in order to actually achieve these goals and solve these global challenges together. So that's some of the points I want to state when it comes to boosting these new green solutions that we need.
Much, Per. It's great to hear what Innovation Norway is doing. And I heard a couple of crucial messages there: green finance and public-private partnerships and other things that need to be done. Now, I believe we have fixed our audio issues with our other two speakers. So, Børge Brende, I'm going to go to you now about the World Economic Forum. How are you prioritizing climate change?
Well, thank you. Good morning from Geneva. Great to see you all. And thank you for bringing us together on such a crucial topic. Just to follow up on what also Per said, I think the important piece now for us moving forward is this public-private partnerships. The global governments have stimulated the economy with $14 trillion US, has not happened since the Second World War. So there are less fiscal muscles moving forward. So we will have to rely on the energy and the green transition also being partnerships between the private sector and governments. And we're already seeing very important things happening in this field. From the World Economic Forum side, we have three important components. We have the 1,000 leading companies in the world as our partners. And the three initiatives are the following. We have 150 global CEOs from Fortune 500 companies that all have committed to go net zero by 2050. I think this is very consequential, and this is CEO Climate Leaders Alliance. And then we also have another initiative that I strongly believe in is Mission Possible, and underlining the cost of inaction far exceeds the cost of action. And Mission Possible, we have 430 companies in the hard-to-abate sectors, like aluminium, steel, aviation, shipping, that come together and say that they will make sure that their CO2 greenhouse footprint is dramatically reduced in the years to come. And the third one is a little bit more secret, but it's going to be launched at COP26. It's an initiative between the State Department in the US and the World Economic Forum. And I can say so much that it's addressing the huge potential in big companies using their purchasing power to make technologies that are not commercially available today to kind of advance the introduction of these technologies.
Well, that is quite extraordinary. We look forward to that launch at COP26, which of course is kicking off on October the 31st. Now finally, Mr. Bhaskar, give us a sense of what the National Environment Agency here in Singapore is trying to do.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone in Singapore, and good on you and elsewhere. Can you hear me?
We are hearing you, yes. Yes, we are hearing you perfectly. Well, there's a little bit of interference. If you keep speaking, perhaps we'll just give it another 10 seconds. No, we are yes, we are hearing you now.
Okay, great. So as you're aware, Singapore is a low-lying island state, and it's especially vulnerable to climate change. The latest reports by the Center for Climate Research in Singapore indicate that the sea level around this region will rise by about 1 meter. And given the fact that 30% of Singapore is a low-lying, less than 5 meters above sea level, this is a significant threat to us. Singapore has always prioritized to ensure the long-term sustainability of our nation. But this year, earlier this year, we launched the Singapore Green Plan to galvanize the whole of a nation movement to fight climate change. The Green Plan sets out ambitious and concrete sectoral targets over the next 10 years to support our commitments under the UN's Sustainable Development Agenda and the Paris Agreement. An expansive and a
I think I'm just going to jump
multi-sectoral...
in there because we are getting some audio issues on your end. We are getting a lot of your message there, and it's crucial to hear about the Singapore Green Plan. Obviously, it's a crucial target for Singapore to try to achieve its carbon emissions, but unfortunately we are having some trouble hearing you. So I shall go now to Professor Horton, who's here with us. We can see you and we can hear you, presumably. Obviously, we know that climate change is just such a crucial issue of our lifetime. Give us a sense of, do you think the countries around the world, these public-private partnerships, all these pledges that we're hearing, is it moving fast enough?
Well, I mean, I'm very pleased to be here. I was very pleased to be invited because what happens in the Arctic is going to dominate climate change for the planet for a variety of reasons that perhaps I could explain later. I mean, I think that now it's accepted as a fact that climate change is happening. It's accepted as a fact that it's due to human activity. Only today there was a survey that came out of the scientific community where 99.9% of scientists agreed that humans are the cause of climate change. And if you work in a university like I do, to get scientists to agree on something is near impossible. So we have that element, but what is missing is the urgency of climate change. We've seen your very esteemed speakers talk today about the Paris Agreement. So if I look at the captains of industry and business out in front of me, do you understand why the Paris Agreement is so important? The Paris Agreement is to keep global mean temperatures below 2 degrees C above pre-industrial averages. So what is the difference in temperature between 1880 and when are we going to cross that 2 degrees C threshold? Because if we cross that 2 degrees C threshold, the scientific data says that civilization will collapse. We're not talking about a drop in GDP. We're not talking about stocks and shares dipping. We're talking about the disintegration of the Antarctic ice sheet. Let's give you some facts. The Antarctic ice sheet is 20,000 times the size of Singapore. It's 3 kilometers thick and it has 65 meters of sea level rise. So when we hear about NEA saying, oh, we're thinking about a 1 meter rise, well, if we don't commit to the Paris Agreement, you're talking about a 10 to 20 meter rise. And that means that every island nation on this planet disappears. And that's just one element of it. So I think it's fantastic that you're all here to listen about climate change and the innovative solutions. But we have to think about how urgent it is. I've been a climate scientist for 25 years. I was an author on the 5th assessment report, and I was an editor on the recent 6th assessment report that came out in September. Urgency is the key. The facts are there. We have all these pathways now. We can decide what carbon pathway we're going to go on, and you can look at the implications. We have to keep our global temperatures below 2 degrees C. Since 1880, it's already gone up 1.1. We have very little wiggle room. So my message is urgency.
Do you think we'll be hearing any of those messages from COP26, which will really be enough to actually address this urgency that you talk about? I mean, keeping it under the carbon emissions and cutting it by 2050, which is a goal, is it really far enough?
Well, I think if we'd had this conference this time last year, then things would have been far more negative. I think with the election of Joe Biden, changed things dramatically in the United States. One of his immediate things was to re-sign up to the Paris Agreement, but we'll see how that infrastructure plan goes, because it's key that they're able to push this through Congress. Again, it's one of these aspects that frustrates you as a scientist. Why is a senator from Virginia not agreeing to sign up to have an infrastructure where there are clean jobs and you reduce your carbon emissions? Again, it's the gravity of the situation. Machin says, it's not my problem. I'm going to look after the next 4 years. We're talking about our future generations. But we can be positive because of the actions of the European Union. We can be positive because of the words coming out of President Biden or the words coming out of China, India, and elsewhere in the world, that there are this agreement that we should do something. What we need to see is short-term gains. It's very easy, in my opinion, to say that we're going to be carbon neutral by 2040 or 2050. I want to know what's going to happen in 2025 and in 2030. Where is the reduction? And that comes from everything. And I'll say this coming from a world-leading university. I've been trying to stress to Nanyang Technological University that we want to be carbon neutral by 2030. But even within a university, they will not agree to that. They push it out 2035, 2040. Right. We need short-term commitments, a carbon tracker to see what our emissions are year on year and how individual, community, governments and business go about reducing that.
I mean, that is such an important message that you're giving, and I'm sure all the other speakers have heard it too. Now, these short-term commitments, let me put this question now to some of our other panelists. Børge Brende, where you're sitting in Geneva, I mean, how is the World Economic Forum going to try to achieve not just those long-term commitments of carbon emission, but these short-term goals?
Is on fire.
We're having trouble hearing you. Yes, we hear you now. Go ahead.
So when our planet is on fire, we don't wait 30 or 40 years. I couldn't agree more. And of course, we also have to then short-term also address the low-hanging fruits. But what is so good now, it's not any longer about why, it's about how. How can we make sure that we also set more ambitious targets before 2030. And this is also incredibly important for the success of the COP26. The challenge is that not all nations have even now submitted their adjusted targets before the COP. And some countries have not adjusted their targets, something that is important. So I hope we can build a momentum in the run-up to the COP, that countries also clearly underline that they will do more by 2030. And here I think also the private sector is incredibly important to now also show that we are taking very, very seriously also the commitments by 2030.
Thank you for that, Børge Brende. Now, to you next, Per Nidebakk. Norway, like Singapore, is a country very reliant on oil and gas. Obviously, Norway produces much of it. Singapore refines a lot of it. So diversifying away from these fossil fuel industries is crucial to try to slash carbon emissions. So give us a sense of how Innovation Norway is stimulating businesses who have innovative green solutions to combat climate change.
Well, I don't believe that technology or technological development is the problem. It's a more sense of urgency, as stated earlier, and as Benjamin said. And if we look at Norway, we had an all-time high on exports the last 3 months in export value, and over 60% of that surplus came from oil and gas. So, I mean, we also in Norway have to have a sense of urgency in building these new industries. And I believe that businesses, they go where they see profitable business opportunities. So we actually have to make these old solutions more expensive and the new solutions more attractive and cheaper. And the way of doing this is actually to channel the schemes, the financial schemes that we have supporting Norwegian business and industry towards the new solutions and not financing the old solutions. So that's one thing. And if you look in a broader picture, I believe that you have to combine industrial policy with climate policy. And I think that the European Union has done a very good job in their new Green Deal, where they're actually combining these different policy fields. And I hope that the rest of the world would think the same. And we as a nation, we are not a member of the European Union, but a member of we have an EEA agreement. So we participated in all these framework programs that the European Union have. And they are focusing a lot on missions, where the main goal for the schemes that they have or the support they have is not only scaling or growing business, it's also about making these green solutions, in finding solutions to our common global challenges. So I think that's also the right way of thinking, and that's something that we have implemented in our own strategy in Innovation Norway, not only to look at the scaling and growth of companies, but also how they can contribute on a global scale to solve these global challenges.
Thank you for that. Now, Mr. Basker, we're going to try to go to you again, and hopefully the audio issues are sorted. But you must have heard a little bit about what your panelists have said. I mean, obviously the urgency is crucial. Give us a sense of how Singapore is coming up with these innovative solutions and possibly tying up with the private industry as well and businesses to try to combat climate change.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me now.
We are hearing you now, yes.
Okay, great, yeah. So as I mentioned, the Singapore Green Plan 2030 was launched earlier this year with very specific sectoral targets and programs that we intend to roll out over the next 5 to 10 years. I'd just like to mention a few of them. For example, we want to quadruple the solar energy deployment by 2025. So we hope to install about 1.5 gigawatts of solar panels in Singapore. A lot of that will be driven actually by the public sector. We intend to plant 1 million more trees across the whole of the island to increase the number of trees that we have already planted from some 2 million. We want to front load efforts to achieve a 20% reduction in waste to our landfills per capita, which will also contribute to reducing our carbon footprint. We want to achieve a 2/3 reduction in real carbon emissions from schools, for example. So we want to have at least 20% of the schools to become carbon neutral by, say, 2030. We want to green 80% of the buildings in Singapore by 2030 and have 60% of new buildings to be super low energy buildings also around the same time. We want to phase out the internal combustion engine by 2040 and roll out some 60,000 charging points for electric vehicles. So these are some of the measures that we have specifically announced and intend to implement over the next few years. We've also launched a zero waste master plan in 2019, and part of that master plan also calls for the reduction of waste that contribute to carbon emissions. So over time, I believe that as we lock on more measures, eventually we will be able to reduce our emissions and to achieve a peak emission, say by 2030, and then subsequently to reduce our emissions over the long term by 2050, say by to half of what we will emit, say by 2030.
Okay, well, thank you.
Singapore has substantial challenges, for example, in deploying renewable energy. And we also hope that some of this can be solved by global solutions, that we can then adapt to and implement so that we also decarbonize some of the other sectors, such as the power sector and industry and so on. So these will be global solutions we can then tap onto to reduce our own emissions as well.
Okay, well, that's fantastic to hear what Singapore is doing. Of course, a lot of countries around the world are under pressure now to meet these goals, to try to fulfill their goals at the next COP26. So I guess we've just got a few more minutes left in the panel. Let's try, I suppose, to end on a somewhat optimistic note. I know it has been terrifying to hear the scenario that remains for us if we sit here and do nothing, that action needs to be taken. So ending on an optimistic note, just give us a sense, each of you, if you can tell us if you feel optimistic that we'll achieve carbon neutrality by 2050? Is it possible? And what are some quick solutions on how it can be done? Let's start with you, Børge Brende.
Well, thank you, and thank you for ending on optimistic note. When we can land something on Mars, of course, we can also fix this thing related to going carbon neutral by 2050. It is just a question of using the tools that we have in the toolbox. Of course, we have to stop subsidizing the most heavy fossil fuel. We're using billions of US dollars in many countries on that, could be reallocated to better purposes. We also have to stop the net logging of the forest of the world. That can, as a sink, absorb short-term 20% of the CO2 emissions, but still we're seeing net logging, illegal logging, that's unacceptable. But how can we move in a new direction, and how to create optimism around it? And if we had this discussion 10 years ago, and I said the price of solar would fall to 1/10 in 10 years, and the price of wind would fall to 1/7, people would think I was blue-eyed and very naive. And today we know that solar in many countries are totally competitive with traditional fuels, and even outcompete them without any kind of subsidies. Of course, it started with the introduction where we used incentives to get these renewables on the table and make them competitive. So in the years to come, of course, we have potential when it comes to green hydrogen. We also will need to make carbon capture, storage, and sequestration commercially available and competitive. We also will need to look into opportunities to capture CO2 from the air and etc. And at the same time, we will need to move from a society based on fossil fuel and have a bridge over to a society where we see much more renewables. Of course, the elephant in the room now is that we're seeing the energy transition having some hiccups. And I'm worried about this. I know we were supposed to end only on a positive note, but you know, in the run-up to COP26, when we see energy blackouts and etc. in the big economies of the world, that's a bit of a challenge. But it is not climate change measures causing this, it's the lack of the steps that we have taken the last years to internalize the externalities. The cost of inaction, as I said at the beginning, far exceeds the cost of action. And that is what we have to drive down, and then use the social market economy to set the right price of carbon and what is causing of harm to our planet. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, that is such a crucial message, isn't it? And it's wonderful that so many strides have been taken in terms of innovative solutions and bringing down the costs of crucial things like solar. Now, I'm actually going to take a pause about my question around optimism, because there's a wonderful question here that's had 21 votes on Slido. So thank you, all of you, for putting your questions through. And it's a question by Chuan Yi Puan. What are some digital transformative initiatives that would be a good starting point for small, medium enterprises to drive sustainability? So these are a question around digital transformation. And we only have about 5 minutes or so. So would Per Niederbach, would you like to pick up this question? Obviously, Innovation Norway, and you have innovation in your name. So give us a sense of digital transformations that might help with smaller businesses and helping them transform.
Well, I can refer to this energy transition outlook, and it's talking about the need to make our energy system more efficient. And it's mostly about digitalization. You have a lot of tech companies working together with these large energy companies, actually making grids more efficient and so on. So that's some part of where digitalization and a more green economy goes hand in hand. So we're talking about green and digital. So yes, I think smaller companies, tech companies, had a vital role in actually accomplishing many of these global green solutions and solving these global challenges that we face. So I'm just to add, I'm slightly optimistic. You can be sad when you read the reports, but I'm slightly optimistic, and it's due to the technology that we see, all the clever companies, persons that we have that actually comes up with innovative solutions. And once again, I think we have to have this public-private partnership. We have to work across borders. We were talking in the beginning about close cooperation between Singapore and Norway. That's crucial. Here we see much closer cooperation with our European friends and Nordic friends in actually finding the right solution. So in that sense, I'm slightly optimistic, and I hope that this cooperation that you will discuss today is something that we can strengthen in the future, because that's needed in order to find solutions.
Thank you, Per Niederbach. And certainly, this is a start, isn't it? We are all here gathered talking about this. It is truly an optimistic note in that sense. Now, very quickly, we simply have 4 minutes left. Mr. Bhaskar, again, the question around the optimism, are you optimistic we can achieve these goals that are being required by many governments around the world? And obviously, I'll put in a bit of that question about digitization as well. Singapore is a smart nation, so how far are we going with digitization? Is it helping?
Well, digitization also brings with it the other effect, which is higher energy consumption, right? So these are also some of the paradoxes that we have to deal with. So we have to make sure that in our digitization efforts, we also make sure that our energy consumption doesn't go up, or if it goes up, that it is replaced by renewable energy. So these are some of the dichotomies we have to also deal with. In terms of optimism, well, we really hope that something turns up at the next COP. And I think one of the things that perhaps everyone could possibly agree on is that we need to put a price on carbon, right? So that would actually drive a lot of the innovation, drive a lot of the implementation of technology and so on. If there were some common idea of what the price on carbon would be, that would actually help to fuel the transition, the green transition even faster.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bhaskar. Now, Professor Horton, you're here and you get the last word. I know you painted a very bleak scenario for all of us. You've got us all frightened. We should be frightened. It's justified. Are you optimistic, though, that countries can come together and achieve these goals that are required of us to combat climate change?
Well, I'm an optimistic person. If anyone who knows me, I'm not all doom and gloom. I think the key is education. And the key is the next generation. I work at a university that's top 20 in the world, and the students there, if we give them the time, they will find the solutions to climate change. We sort of understand now how the Earth works, so we can understand how to solve it. But climate change is going to be a problem that's based around science, but involves business, it involves humanities, it involves the arts, it involves communications. It's a holistic problem. You need holistic solutions. And if you think about science, Singapore's not going to solve the problem. And why I was invited here today was because we have an innovation with our Norwegian counterparts to understand sea level here in Singapore. So if you think about sea level rise, it's not all about the melting of Greenland and Antarctica. It's how the oceans move and how their heat content is transferred. And the global experts at understanding heat content in our ocean are the Norwegians. So when there was the National Sea Level Programme, sponsored by NEA here, we partnered with our Norwegian scientists so we can provide the best possible solutions to the stakeholders here in Singapore and Southeast Asia.
Well, that's wonderful to hear that the research is getting done to try to solve these issues. Thank you again, audience, for those fantastic questions. The questions I didn't get to ask on Slido, I will ask on our later panels as well. But please do give a warm round of applause to our wonderful high-level panel. Borge Brende from the World Economic Forum in Geneva. Of course, we have Ananda Rambaskar from the National Environment Agency here in Singapore, and Per Niederbach at Innovation Norway, and finally, Professor Benjamin Horton. Thank you all for that insightful panel. Thank you. Now, before we get on to our next session on investing in sustainability, here's a video from DNB, which will, by 2030, finance and facilitate $175 billion for sustainable activities.
Thank you.
Nei, jeg vet. Nei, uten havet. Hva igjen da?
Havet står for en fjerdedel av verdiskapningen i norsk økonomi.
Den norske sjømatnæringen forsyner jo verden med 25 000 måltider hvert minutt.
Vi får hverken importert eller eksportert noe i nærheten av hva vi trenger.
Ringvirkningene av stengte gassledninger vil bli enorme.
Og gjennomsnittsfamilien vil måtte betale betydelig mer skatter for å ha de velferdskodene vi har i dag.
Her de stille, her trenger vi ingen ord. Vi lar bølgene snakke for oss. Her vi
That's a wonderful message, isn't it? And next up, we have Vigborg Ren, which is one of the biggest and most international law firms in Norway, with offices in Oslo, Bergen, London, Singapore, and Shanghai. Here's their video.
The ocean plays a vital role for sustainable development. I'm proud to say that we are partners in the One Ocean Expedition.
Covering 70% of the world's surface, the oceans play a critical role in the Earth's climate system, as a provider of resources and in connecting regions and people.
Vigborg Ren is one of Norway's largest law firms. We work very hard every day to ensure that our operations have a positive impact on society and on the environment.
In order to best protect and preserve our oceans, the decisions we make must be science-based. Building knowledge and network is an important part of this expedition.
We have specialized teams that work with a wide range of topics related to sustainability. Through the One Ocean Expedition, we can increase our knowledge and at the same time contribute with our expertise to the benefit of others.
I am very excited to be part of One Ocean in a sustainability project that can really make a change.
Some great messages there from our sponsors. And now for a session on investing in sustainability, and I'm going to introduce our speakers for this session. We have Karin Smith-Ihenako, who's joining us virtually. She's the Chief Governance and Compliance Officer of Norges Bank Investment, and she joins us virtually, I believe. We also have Jan Fredrik Sheltorp. He's the head of Asia, the general manager for DNB Bank. And I believe Jan is here with us. And we have Leslie Tarn, special counsel at Vigborg Ren. Welcome to you both. And of course, Karin, who's joining us virtually. Nice to meet you. Fantastic, nice to meet you too. Excellent. So investing in sustainability, I mean, in the last session, we heard how crucial that is, because it's not just governments, it's also the private industry, it's public partnerships and all of that needs to come together to really solve the issue of climate change. So let's first start with you, Karin. I mean, how do institutional investors like yourselves look at strategic investments in the context of the green transition?
Hello, and sadly I can't be there, but greetings from Oslo. Yes, I mean, we are large institutional investors. So we're the manager of the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, around $1.4 trillion these days. And 70% of our investments are in listed companies. So that means we own, on average, 1.5% of every listed company in the world. And a large institutional investor can basically do two things when it comes to the green transition. It's to invest more in sustainable companies, invest less in others, or it's to use our ownership, in these companies to try to help the companies and support the companies in becoming more sustainable. And we do both. So we invest more in what we call environmental companies, and we have around 9% of our investments in so-called environmental companies. And that is companies that work in natural resource management, low emission energy, alternative fuels, clean energy and efficient technology. And so it's a whole range of companies we then invest in. And in addition, we also have opened up for unlisted renewable energy infrastructure. And just recently, we acquired a 50% in a large offshore wind farm located outside in the Netherlands. But in addition to all of that, we really work with our companies, the companies we have invested in, to help them and be supportive in their transition towards a low carbon future.
Okay, well, that's great to know that so much is being done there. Jan, I guess I'll look to you in terms of DNB is doing a lot. There's a huge investment in sustainability. So give us a sense of what you're doing.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. Very good to be here. Yes, they talked about earlier today about long-term and short-term goals, which I think is very important. And I also noticed that the 2050 goal is too far away. We have also a 2050 goal, which is to be net zero in 2050. But we also have shorter goals. So by 2025, we are about to invest, it's 450 billion NOK in renewable energy by giving loans and supporting our clients. And by 2030, we have a goal to contribute with finance, with bonds, with equity, with about 1,500 billion NOK. That's 180 billion US dollars. So I think for us, it's crucial to put targets on ourselves as well. And by that, we also put targets on our clients, because if we're going to reach our goals, we also need our clients to reach their goals.
Absolutely. Now, Leslie, I know you represent the legal framework behind all of this, but you must be exposed to so many of your clients who are doing likewise. So give us a sense of what you're seeing in investments into sustainability.
Yes, I think what we're seeing now is there's a real expectation on the part of stakeholders like governments, investors, even society, to really be looking for companies that invest in corporate responsibility, that have green frameworks that are in line with the green vision. So, for example, the green loan principles, the green bond principles, they're really starting to want to invest in companies that recognize how the framework needs to align with corporate responsibility, to adopt standards of transparency and disclosure, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely crucial, isn't it? Now, I'll move back to you, Karin, because I know, like DNB, you're an investor in thousands of companies, some 9,000 companies, in fact. What do you expect from investee companies when it comes to sustainability, and how do you engage with them?
Yeah, we are an active investor, so we engage with the companies we have invested in. And we want to be a transparent owner, a predictable owner. So we have actually published several documents which lay out our expectations of companies when it comes to key sustainability challenges and also opportunities. And some of that is around climate change, of course, and we newly issued some expectations around biodiversity. And we have it also on human rights. So what we set out is expectations towards the company boards. And we really want to understand want the board to understand the broader environmental and social consequences of their company's operations. And we say they should integrate that into corporate strategy, risk management, but also reporting, as was mentioned. And we engage in dialogue with the companies to follow up our expectations. So only this year, we have actually had 1,900 company meetings where we discuss issues around climate change and how the company is prepared for a low carbon future. And we also talk about short-term targets, medium-term targets, and their goals to get to net zero in 2050. And really, our aim is to promote good corporate governance and responsible business practices. And what we do see give us some hope for optimism, actually, because we do see that many of the companies are going in the right direction.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. I guess, you know, likewise to you, this question as well, Jan. Obviously, DNB is investing a lot. What do you expect from the investments that you make? You know, and how do you avoid that dreaded term, greenwashing?
Yeah, I think if we can start with greenwashing, I think that was more a challenge maybe a few years ago than it is today. And that's basically because of a lot of governments and the EU and also ASEAN and other regions, they have put together taxonomies, which helps the financial institutions to actually finance what is really green. Because some years back, we didn't know really what was really green. So then each country or each financial institution, they found their own framework to say what's green. And now this is more common frameworks and taxonomies, which makes it easier. And when it comes to what we should invest our money in or lend out money to, you cannot. I don't think that no one can do it for everyone. So we have to focus on where are your own focus area. And obviously, coming from Norway and Norwegian Bank, it's the energy space, it's oil and gas, it's seafood, which we are leading in, it's shipping. And our focus is not really to say no to our clients, it's more to help out with the transition with our clients. And I think that's crucial to help our clients and help the environment to go in the right direction, is that we all need to push together. And this is not done overnight. So we have to work together, and that's why this is our main focus, is actually to help our clients to transit.
I mean, it's really interesting to see how so many companies are coming together. They're really pushing this message. It's not greenwashing, it's ESG, you know, environment, social governance, and other things. Leslie, I know, again, you don't really represent an institutional investor yourself, but what are you seeing with your clients specifically when it comes to those really crucial issues?
Oh, I think that's a really good question, Sharon. I think with the green loan principles and the green bond principles, these are voluntary. They are non-prescriptive, which is great because it means that we use them to adapt to the situation, as Jan Fredrik has rightly pointed out. But they also cause a bit of issues for banks and investors in being able to assess whether or not these products actually do they engage with the objectives of the green vision. And so this is a bit of a shameless self-plug for lawyers here. Try and get your lawyers involved in coming up with terms and conditions that really do incorporate the green principles and the green bond principles into your documentation. So if we have the time, the bond principles and loan principles are split into 4 components. And I try and remember that by the 4 Ps. It's purpose, process, proceeds, and publication. So you want to make sure to avoid the dreaded greenwashing, as you say, that the documents that incorporate look at having the purpose of the project. Is this intended to help with climate mitigation, for example? Does it go towards a circular economy? Then you look at the process. What sort of quantitative or qualitative performance criteria have the management of the company used in determining whether or not the project has met its green objectives? What sort of green internal framework does the company have? And then you look at proceeds. It's important to make sure that the funds that you achieve through the investment or through the loan, that they are ring-fenced. You don't let them commingle with the other proceeds. That's a very big point. And then finally, publication. You want to make sure that you keep up to date with your disclosure requirements. You want to have requirements for interval reporting, for example. And all of this together really incorporates some of the components from the voluntary principles and really go towards avoiding any accusation of greenwashing.
Yeah, crucial, absolutely. The 4 Ps, try to remember all of them, and also the fact that big companies, big institutional investors should be obviously involving their lawyers at stage 1 when it comes to a lot of these investments. Now, Jan, I'm going to go to you again. I know you talked about the lending that DNB does, but I believe you're $175 billion, that's the term that's been bandied about, or the amount that's been bandied about in terms of what is being invested in sustainable activities. Can you give us a sense of where that money is going?
Yes, I think it's two-sided, because we have the lending side, and then you have the like getting the capital from investors. So I would say for the lending side, it's more in the field where at least we are strong. As I said, seafood, oil and gas, shipping. When it comes to getting bonds, equities, investors, that could be in various different areas, which is everything actually that is helping the world to go in the right direction. Because 76% of all the emissions in the world comes from energy consumption. That's manufacturing, it's vehicles, it's aviation, it's shipping, it's all of it. And I think for if you, let's say you are a mid-sized company, and you hear all this high-level talk about all these investments and taxonomies and everything, it could be a bit overwhelming. So I would say that it will be invested trillions of dollars into the energy transition and into getting the emissions down. And what you really should look for as a company is, okay, and it's 76% which is in energy. Yep. And if you divide that down, you can find your niche. Where am I operating? And how can I contribute to that energy transition? Because it's, in the end, this is also about economy. So the gravity of economy is still there. It's always there. Yep. So the money will flow where you can get a good return. And that goes for investors, it goes for banks, it goes for everyone.
Yeah. Karin, I know you're listening over there. Do you sense a bit of the same as well? Is the money flowing to, obviously, the industries that kind of demand it? Where are you seeing the investments going specifically?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. In the end, investors, they need return on the money. And even for us as a fund, we have one mission, and that's to create long-term value for future generations of Norwegians. So I absolutely agree with that. And that's also why we want to be an owner in the companies. And DNB talked about not saying no to clients, but rather work with the clients. And that's precisely how we look at the world. We want to continue to be an owner rather than to sell out, and work with the companies. And of course, for us, it's important that when we have specific environmental mandates, that we try to pick the winners, not only the winners when it comes to low carbon emission, but also the winners when it comes to long-term value creation, the companies that can be profitable in the longer run. But we have a great advantage being a fund for future generation. And that is that we can think long term. So we can look at this on a sort of generation perspective, But still, of course, in the end, the companies have to be profitable and make returns for the investors.
All right. Now, interesting, I'm going to follow up with that because I know that you're, again, you both represent, Jan and Karin, you know, universal investors in a way. But give us a sense of whether there are companies that you no longer wish to be a shareholder of or, you know, invest in for ethical or sustainability reasons. Let's start with you,
and I can.
Oh, go ahead, Karin.
Oh,
no,
sorry.
go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. Yes, I can talk a bit about that because I said we want to be an owner, and we are, as you said, in more than 9,000 companies. But there are some companies that in the end we decide to not be a shareholder in. And it's basically two reasons for that. Because every year we look at the portfolio in detail, and then we look at some companies and see that these companies, they just don't have a business model that's sustainable in the longer run. So in those companies, we may decide, you know, we don't believe these are the companies we can work with from a sort of ownership perspective. We're just going to sell out. And we probably sold out of around 300 companies because of that, just because we don't believe in the business model. Maybe it's misaligned with prevailing technological or regulatory or environmental trends. So we sell out of those. In addition, our fund has a sort of peculiar mechanism in the sense that we have an independent council on ethics that recommend companies to be excluded based on certain guidelines that's issued by the Norwegian Ministry of Finance. And those guidelines basically said that we should not be invested in companies that produce certain types of weapons, base their operation on coal, or produce tobaccos. Or we should not either be investing in companies whose conduct contributes to violations of, it's called fundamental ethical norms. So based on those guidelines, we also exclude certain companies, and we excluded quite a lot of companies because of environmental reasons. So that means, you know, we sell out and we exclude certain companies. But in the end, there's still a lot of companies we are an owner in.
Okay. I guess same question to you, Jan.
Yes. There are certain companies that we don't want to invest in, or also sectors. Coal is obviously one thing, but it's not black and white. This is, it's black. But because you could have companies that has different kind of energy production. They could have coal, they could have a portion of coal, they could have a portion of renewables. So it really depends on what area in that company that we want to invest in. That's obviously not the coal side. But if you have companies that are actually transitioning into a more green and renewable field, that could be something that we want to follow. And on the opposite side, it could be companies that we have today, which is, let's say, in the oil and gas sector, and that are not really want to put a goal on their own transition. It could be that they are not like really challenging today, but we see that they can be there in the future. But if they don't want to transition to a more renewable or a greener side, that could be like the opposite that we don't want to follow.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Now, once again, Leslie, I know you represent a law firm, but obviously it's a very, you know, a law firm that's very, as we heard in the message earlier, very committed to, you know, carbon emissions, fighting climate change. So is there a sense that even within your industry, you're not advising those big polluting coal producers, for instance? Is there, you know, are you guys picky about your choice of clients?
Well, I would like to say that we are always picking in terms of choice of clients. But again, just going on what Jan Fredrik has said, I think there needs to be a situational awareness of the realities on the ground. For the next decade or so, we are going to be looking at petroleum products. That's going to be the main source of fuel. So it's impossible to say that we're going to move away from that overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day. So we were involved actually in the first maritime green bond in Scandinavia, and that involved, and this was in 2018, that involved one of our clients converting their fleet of shuttle tankers into e-shuttle tankers. So one of the questions that people would raise with us is, look, that's associated with the petroleum industry. How could that possibly be considered a green bond? Well, we looked at it as, firstly, these were commitments to existing oil fields. Yes, they are carrying and transporting petroleum, but these were already commitments. What our client wanted to do was to take their conventional outdated fleet and modernize it, use a hybrid of battery and LNG. So that's a step in the right direction, we think. And I think anything that we can do to try and move companies, try and transition companies towards a greener, sustainable future is better than leaving them out in the cold and saying that, no, we're not going to work with you, we're not going to transact with you. So we think that gradual differences do help us eventually.
That's great to know. Now, we are getting, once again, thank you all, the audience over here and watching at home, who have actually been contributing some great questions on Slido. So I am going to ask one of the questions here, and I believe it was sent earlier, but I think it's still relevant to this panel as well, because it's all about investing in sustainability. Question from Samir with 26 votes. What innovative measures can Norway and Singapore take together to mitigate climate change and tackle the pandemic? Gosh, that's a hard ask. But Karin, do you want to try to take that? I mean, is there a way that countries can somehow come together and align themselves?
Gosh, that's a difficult one. The thing is, we are a state-owned fund, and we try to stay out of politics and try to give the government advice on what they should do. We stick to managing the fund, the sovereign wealth fund. But of course, there's a lot of fund can do, which we have talked about, in the whole transition and in the work with climate. And really, which we are, working on every day. But I think I should refrain from giving our owners and the government any advice on this.
Okay. Jan, do you want to try to take that? Or maybe perhaps not governments coming together, but, just the idea of that you could reach out to companies here in Asia, in Singapore, to try to deal with those issues.
I think this conference is Singapore-Norway Innovation Conference,
That's
right? So there is something in the name that we should work together to find innovational solutions for this. But I also think that the sustainable transition, it's not only about getting greener, because sustainability is also about economy. If you don't have a sustainable economy, we will never be able to transition. So to have that collaboration between our two countries, to focus on, yes, the green shift, but also it should be sustainable in economic terms. And I think that we have, Singapore is the hub for many Norwegian companies going out to do business in Asia. And to bridge the knowledge and capital between Norway and Singapore is something that I think we as banks and investors and also companies doing business in Singapore, in this region, and in Norway should really focus on. But because I think it's a lot to learn between our two countries, and there is also capital that can be transferred back and forth to really invest in these new solutions.
And it's interesting you bring that up, the fact that Norwegian companies are here in Singapore, because there's another great question here on Slido from Ketil Aubo. I hope I'm saying the name right. What is Singapore doing in order to remain attractive as a hub for Norwegian companies wanting to establish business in Singapore and the Asian region. I don't know if you want to pick up on that, or Karin, do you want to talk about that?
Well, what I can say is that Singapore is a market for us. We are an investor in Singapore, in Singaporean companies. And of course, for the companies, it's important to have stable regulatory framework conditions, right? And that's also something we look at when we invest in companies. And in particular, when we invest in our environmental mandates, it's important to know that these are companies that can survive in the longer term, as we talked about earlier, and a lot of that is about the regulatory framework and having conducive environment to business.
That's great.
Yeah, I think that question probably comes a bit from the situation we are in. And I think we need to see a bit beyond the very challenging situation we are in now. Because historically, Singapore has been a very, very good place to be, to expand your business in Asia. And I'm sure it will be after the pandemic as well. Now it's a bit challenging. It's hard to get people in and out of Singapore. But I am sure with the legal framework, with the stable government and everything that is in Singapore, this will still be a good hub to expand your business in Asia.
Fantastic. Leslie, I know, again, not an institutional investor, but you are part of a big legal firm. And I'm conscious of the fact you're a Singaporean lawyer working here in Singapore with a lot of Norwegian firms. Yes. So give us a sense of the synergies of how attractive Singapore will continue to be as a hub for Norwegian firms.
Oh, I think tremendously attractive. I mean, Singapore, I think, always has the best of both worlds. It's very Western oriented, but it's also located in Asia. It's got a very good, strong situational awareness of what the context is. So Singapore is trying to position itself, and I believe will succeed in positioning itself as the green finance hub of ASEAN. And to that end, they've established a government task force that's going to create its own Singapore taxonomy, which is substantially modeled after the EU taxonomy, but done in a very Singaporean way in that it doesn't go quite that far. It tries to dial back a little bit by taking into account the dynamics of ASEAN, the fact that ASEAN is still very, very much run on coal power. So again, going back to my point earlier about trying to be moderate in things, I think Singapore will strike and does always strike the right balance in terms of trying to be commercial, but also being realistic about the situation, basically. But I think there are tremendous efforts being made to try and position ourselves as a green hub. And I think that will be attractive to Norwegian companies and indeed companies from across the world as we go forward.
Fantastic. And thank you for that wonderful question, by the way. And keep them coming on Slido. We've got about 10 minutes, and I guess, I'm curious because we've talked a lot about investing, and obviously you guys have guidelines and standards at what you're looking at, particularly when you're looking to invest in sustainable companies that are climate friendly. But give us a sense of the kind of policies and systems that are in place to allocate capital to promising technologies, basically, that pursue the climate-friendly approach. I mean, what kind of standards do you have in place? Karin, should we start with you?
Yeah, sure. It's absolutely right. We have quite clear sort of guidelines on what we can and can't invest in. And the starting point is that we follow an index set by the Ministry of Finance. But then we have specific mandates to invest in environmental related companies. And then a good question, what are environmental related companies? How do you define that? How do you make sure you don't go into greenwashing and support those type of companies? And so we have around 10 billion euros invested in 1990 companies under the environmental related mandate. And what we've said, we have sort of put a threshold on that, and we have said that companies must have a minimum of 20% of their business in one of 3 specific areas to be considered part of our environmental universe. So we sort of go through companies, look at their reporting, see how much of the business really is environmental. And we mentioned that earlier about reporting. That's why it's so important that the companies report not just qualitatively, but also quantitative targets. So what we have then defined is the 3 areas I mentioned earlier. It's low emission energy, alternative fuels, clean energy, efficient technology, and natural resource management. And that's really those 3 areas that we define as our environmental mandate. But then in addition, it's important to remember that a lot of the other companies we are owner in they are going to be crucial in the whole transition towards low carbon future. And many of those are, of course, companies that are involved in oil and gas, heavy industries, but hopefully will transition. And I think we should not forget those companies too.
Wonderful. Likewise, yeah, for DNB?
Yeah, I would say for us it's two different focus on this. It's the like the bank's zero emission as an institution, and United Nations has made a framework for that, how the banks should measure themselves to get to that goal. And that is what we are basing our own goals on. When it comes to the clients, it's different initiatives. It's government driven, but it's also driven by European banks, like the Poseidon principles in shipping. That was started with, I think it was 6 or 7 European banks, agreeing upon some measurements that they should do to measure the shipping industry within a framework. So I think it's a combination of like a government-driven, it's financial institutions or investor-driven, and it's also like driven by industries themselves. Yeah. But what is I think is important in the future and going forward is that now I think we have there are a bit different focus in different regions and different countries. What will be important in the future is that you find more common frameworks, because you are in the same competitive environment, and that makes it crucial that we measure the same on the same clients. Yeah.
Interesting. So basically what I'm hearing is, I mean, obviously you both represent 2 big institutional investors, but the likelihood is many institutional investors are thinking the way you both are, in the sense that, if you are a coal-fired power plant these days, it's going to be a struggle to kind of get financing or find anyone who's willing to invest in you. So essentially those industries are going to be phased out, and there's a big encouragement and a big boost for companies and in industries that are much more climate friendly. Now, we've just got a few more minutes left to this session. Leslie, I'm really interested in the legality behind all of this. You talked about green bonds earlier, but give us a sense. I mean, obviously we've been talking about how this, so much money, trillions of dollars, simply flowing into ESG type initiatives. So give us a sense of, what are some of the challenges you see, particularly, the legal challenges surrounding green finance that companies need to start being aware of?
Right. Well, I think looking at it on a macro level, green finance law is very undeveloped, and it's quite a new nascent area of law compared especially with traditional sources of financing law. So green finance law doesn't have the centuries of legal precedent, whether that's common law or civil law behind it. What it has instead is, as I mentioned, that series of voluntary legal principles and frameworks known as the Green Bond Principles and the Green Loan Principles. Now, the fact that they are voluntary and they are non-prescriptive mean that there is potentially a lack of uniformity, there's a lack of cohesion. Again, I think the biggest stumbling block for both companies as well as stakeholders like the banks and investors is to really make sure that they are engaged with products that do satisfy the green criteria. And one simple way of making sure that that's complied with is by appointing a third party to take a look at the product. So you have organizations that are affiliated with the climate change organizations like CICERO. They have their own set of criteria where they will look at a project and determine whether or not it satisfies for example, the green standards. Is it a light green, meaning is it environmentally friendly? Is it medium green, which means it's a step in the right direction, but it's not quite there yet? Or is it dark green, meaning it's fully aligned with the vision? So the incorporation of having a third party look at your product is really important. Although it is suggested and recommended, what we are seeing is that lots of our clients, banks and bond issuers, are coming to see this and expect this as a market standard. So they are expecting absolutely to have companies have a third-party verification. And that's really just the easiest way of making sure that you don't fall afoul of any arguments of greenwashing.
Fantastic. Some really great advice there for companies listening in. Now, literally, we have 5 minutes, but there's a great question here on Slido from Lukas Luwalski. The revival of the global economy after the waves of COVID has led to a rise in demand for electricity, and countries have turned to coal. So how can we be aligned on decarbonizing globally? In spite of my statement earlier that nobody's investing in coal, there still is a great reliance on it. It is a cheap and efficient way to produce energy. So Lucas wants to know how countries and companies and investors can be aligned on decarbonizing globally. Do you want to start, Jan?
I can try, at least. I think what Børge Brende was talking about, this has to start on a very high level, like everything else in this world. It cannot start with one company or two companies or one country. It has to start on a global level, where we really put the targets and that countries are committing to go in that right direction. I think that's crucial. And when the countries agree to go in the same direction to reach the goal in the Paris Agreement, then this is cascaded down to each country. And when each country set their targets, then this is cascaded down to each like investor, banks, and companies. Yeah, it has to start on the top. If not, it's not going to happen.
And Karin, do you agree with that? Does it need to start from the top, or does it need to start from the top investor?
I very much agree, actually. I mean, the whole climate crisis cannot be solved by investors alone. Clearly, the politicians have a role to play here. But of course, investors also have their role and to assist in the transition that we need to pursue. But it very much starts on the top. When it comes to coal, a lot of investors like us have excluded coal companies from the universe, but from our investing universe. But of course, that doesn't solve anything in a way if you exclude certain companies, at least not sort of in the shorter term. So I agree, it has to start from the very, very top. But of course, investors should do how much they can do, either by choosing where to invest, but more crucially, I believe, using their ownership power in a way to become an active investor to support the companies in the transition.
Fantastic. That's wonderful to know. And I don't know, Leslie, do you have anything to say about that? I mean, where do you see, from where you're sitting, representing a law firm, where does it need to start?
well, I would say start recycling more, basically. But realistically, I do agree with what both of what Jan Fredrik and Corinne have said. I think people are ultimately motivated by a sense of self-interest. We are all interested in having the world become a greener, more sustainable environment, but we're also interested in where our money goes. So start investing in companies that you think have principles that are aligned with your own, that comply with corporate governance, that are really compliant with ESG, for example. And that's what I would say.
Yeah, no, fantastic advice. So thank you, all three of you, for joining us. Audience, please, a warm round of applause for our fantastic panelists who've talked about investing in sustainability. And once again, those great questions from all of you on Slido. I think there are quite a few of you who are, very much in line to win that prize at 6 p.m. So keep those questions coming. We just want to hear from you and all the smart questions. You will win that prize that sits there in the corner. Now, we're about to have a revitalizing break. I'm not allowed to call it a coffee break because you simply cannot go and intermingle. Remember, we have COVID rules here, no intermingling amongst the tables. But just before that, I'd like to draw your attention again to a video from the Norwegian Cultural Center, which is a place devoted to building and facilitating cultural exchange between Norway and Singapore by organizing exhibitions, performances, workshops, and more. So let's take a look at this video.
Arts and culture bring communities together. Each step in this journey aims to strengthen cultural ties between countries around the world. The importance of the intercultural collaboration in visual arts, music, theater, dance, and literature extends to the larger creative sphere and across art forms. As we walk through this exploration comes extraordinary passion and beauty in every unique value, practice, and discipline that define each society. Arts and culture go beyond being a medium of self-expression and a canvas for our imagination. It is our footprint, our history, and the value we pass down to generations. Investing in culture is essential in every nation's development. We need to recognize its impact and contribution to our enrichment, broadening our minds, deepening our compassion, and strengthening our bond with the rest of the world. Space invites everyone to immerse through arts and culture, Norwegians and beyond. Because together, we can make a difference.
There you go, the Norwegian Cultural Center. For our virtual audience who are watching from home or at the office, please, you can go check out the online expo, which is a virtual expo with booths from the sponsors, which is available for all of you watching from home. For those here in Suntec City, I think you've all got some soft drinks on your table. We are breaking for our revitalizing short break, but we will restart again at 4:15. And once again, can I stress that you simply cannot intermingle because we're currently under so many COVID restrictions. So please respect those policies. Thank you. I'll see you at 4:15.